Welcome, friends, to another Wolff Responds. I want to take another opportunity to talk about the continuing saga of Mr. Trump versus Harvard University. And I want to call this one Trying to Control Harvard, because that's what Mr. Trump's behavior is all about. It's him and what he wants and what his government is going to do under his direction versus Harvard University, which I don't have to describe because you all know what that is. And I should make it clear at the beginning that I attended Harvard University. I graduated from Harvard University. I am a Harvard alumnus, and I hope that that does not damage what I'm about to say in both of its purposes and in your minds. So here we go. American universities were, once upon a time, rather separate places. They were places devoted to teaching and to research, and they were maintained for those purposes and those purposes alone. They were organized, like everything else in America, in a rank order of wealth and prestige. At the very top, you had places like Harvard and Yale and Princeton and a whole bunch of places like that. After World War II, the working class of America wanted to have a piece of higher education themselves. Before that, most Americans didn't go beyond high school. And if they did go to college, they were usually the richest amongst us because it was expensive to go to these places, typically in rural areas or away from the center of cities, not always, but most often, where young people could be educated into college and graduate school in a place that focused on that activity. Professors used to come and stay there pretty much for their lifetime, get to know the students, get to work with one another to create a specialized place of learning. After World War II, as I said, this was expanded. All 50 states created the state university system. The University of Michigan, for example, then Michigan State, and then all the little community colleges that Michigan also provides for its citizens, as do most of the other states in this country. But then, particularly after World War II, it became clear to corporate America that a huge number of people were going to higher education. It wasn't something just for the super rich and their children to make sure they got the credential so that they would be rich and be able to take the place of their own parents as the parents aged. No, now it was going to be something for millions of people. Still a minority, but a big one. And so the corporations realized this is a place where lots of young people are going to have their ideas shaped, their ideas about politics, their ideas about economics, their ideas about the capitalist system they live in, and so on. And corporate America decided we want to be able to control what goes on there. They were upset that in some of these schools, sometimes, there were people who were critics of capitalism, critics of the inequalities in American society. That's right, they were thinking people, and they were doing what schools are supposed to have them do, namely, do some thinking, and don't always be a cheerleader for what exists. But the corporations were not interested, not in thinking people, and certainly not in critical thinking. They wanted to get rid of those people. Now, you couldn't go to a college and say, I want to get rid of these people. That's not what the college idea was. We were supposed to send people to college to ask critical questions, to think critically, to identify the problems in society and think about solving them. Imagine. Corporations had no interest. So here's what they began to do. They offered the colleges something that colleges were always short of: money. We'll give you a big donation. We will help you hire professors in this area or that area, or build a school of law, or maybe a school of dentistry. Allow you to grow, allow you to bring more students, allow you to hire more professors. But, if you're going to take our money, well, you can't insult us. We don't want to hear about a professor who doesn't like rich people, who doesn't like a system that makes some people billionaires and lots of other people poverty-stricken. No, you can't have that as a criticism. So it turns out the colleges had, and this has been true for decades, had to play a complicated game, suck up enough to corporations and rich people and big families to get the money, but don't give them quite what they want, because what they want is to make college a place where no critical thinking goes on. That's a serious problem. It has never been solved. It was never solved at Harvard in the years I went to school there, and it has never been solved in any of the universities, and there are several where I have taught in my career as a professor, which is what I've done most of my life. But we now have in Mr. Trump something worse than that. Now we have the government stepping in with its own ideas. It turns out that universities, who were uncomfortable often in taking the money of rich people, they overcame their discomfort, let me assure you. They took plenty of it. Harvard leading the way, but Yale and Princeton, places I've been at, they take tons of money from corporation and tons of money from rich people. They have campaigns, that's what they call them, to raise money. And they raise money not only in the millions, in the billions. But they're always a little uncomfortable because they know about the strings that are always attached. So they were pleased when the government, again, particularly after World War II, when the government offered to help finance higher education. It provided subsidies to the state universities so they could charge lower tuition than the private Harvards of this country, enabling less wealthy people to go to college. This was a privilege won by working people fighting with their legislators to get the bills passed to allow the government to help fund education. The idea was to lessen the dependence of teachers and students on corporations with their strings. And for a while, it worked. Not perfectly. Politicians were also interested in controlling the universities, particularly when unscrupulous ones among them tried to blame their political adversary for something that went on in a university. Back in the 1950s, we had a scare in this country called McCarthyism. It was when a politician, a senator from Wisconsin named Joe McCarthy, used the government to try to control what went on in schools. Who to hire, who to fire, who to allow to teach, would be determining what critical thoughts our delicate students would be exposed to. The excuse then was, we're fighting communism. So all you had to do was say some professor wrote a book that didn't say only horrible things about communism, but maybe a couple of good ones. That guy should be fired. That guy shouldn't teach. That guy is a danger. We got it all the time. There were terrible moments in which a number of colleges, by the way, including Harvard, fired people because they didn't want the hostility of the government looking down on them and maybe cutting off the money. But no one has yet gone as far as Mr. Trump. He doesn't want colleges to do what? To be anti-Semitic. That's what he said. Can you believe it? Anti-Semitism is a real problem. It's been a problem in the United States for centuries. It exists more and less in various parts of this country's culture. Universities is not an area where anti-Semitism is particularly strong, which is why no one has made such a claim until what? Until the Israeli attacks in Gaza. Then, suddenly, we were told we got to worry about anti-Semitism. Not just worry about it, but hold back money, billions, from Harvard, because it won't let the government come in and decide what is and isn't anti-Semitism, what is and isn't abuse of the money that the government gives them for research and for teaching. Wow. What a thin, phony excuse. It was thin and phony in the 50s with McCarthyism, and it's thin and phony now with this new variation of McCarthyism. Turning the problem of anti-Semitism so you can use it as a battering ram to force universities to divulge to a government that has no business there what they teach, how they teach, who they teach. The people who deserve to control what goes on in a university are the teachers and the students and the others who are legitimate stakeholders. The government doesn't give Harvard money because of its position on Israel and Palestine. It gives Harvard money to conduct all kinds of teaching and research with all kinds of benefits to our society. Is it a little sleazy with the cooperation between the university and the corporate sector? Yes, it is. It's sleazy the way most things in this culture are. We live in a culture that gives all the profits to the corporate leaders, and they, of course, use it to shape every part of society in the image they prefer. It's good that Harvard is resisting this. Should have resisted the corporate money too. Should have been a leader in having schools and colleges do what they were established to do with real academic freedom. There should be critics of our society. There should be critics of the foreign policy of the United States. That is a legitimate, necessary openness of a society. Otherwise, you get a bunch of cheerleaders and people who don't know how to say no, no matter how awful the policies and the direction are. We need freedom in our universities. We ought to have more of it. We ought to have it in other parts of our society. Mr. Trump is trying to take away the little bit that's left, and in nothing more important to him than aggrandizing his position at the top of the pyramid of this sad, declining system. If interventions like this strike you as useful additions to a national debate, like the one over Harvard versus Trump, then please share it. Share this video with friends, neighbors, co-workers, anyone who might be interested in thinking about the issues I've tried to raise. And of course, if you can help us financially to defray the costs of producing and distributing these videos, that would be enormously appreciated as well. Thank you.